Chapter 1. Julia moved to Dublin armed with a 12-month working visa when she was 25. She liked the idea of going alone. She knew nobody there and new places and faces called. Prospects for obtaining a working visa run dry for waitresses at 30, and she felt the time was running short. Her friends at home were starting to settle down, produce children and make their commitments. Emma was still living in Liverpool. She had married and her voice on the end of the phone was as pommy as her husband. "I won't fall in love," Julia promised. "I don't ever want to have to choose between there and here." But she did, and the choice tormented her for a long time. About the time Julia's visa expired, she met her Nigerian man and his little boy Charles. She allowed her working visa to lapse, captivated by both of them. Dublin was riding on high times. The streets were full of people and the recession had not yet emerged. There was plentiful work in the hospitality industry with good money attached. She was well aware, however, that without a visa her movement in and out of Ireland was restricted, and so she took on the status of an alien in order to stay and love them both. 12 months later she invited her twin, Katrina, to come to Dublin. Julia had established a wide circle of friends, some Irish, but many like herself, travellers and immigrants. Adventurers, all able to take advantage of inner city life, the cafe and the bars of Temple Bar. Emma came over from England regularly to visit her sisters. Julia phoned in June and offered to pay my fare in order that I could meet the boyfriend and the child. The arrangements were made for me to arrive for Christmas. However, in the interim, the sad news broke. Apparently, there was another woman, the mother of a second of his children, who'd been waiting in the wings, and he had made a choice. The choice left her, as she said, unable to breathe, as if all her life had been sucked from her very lungs. I posted Natalie up with a Lunig prayer. Natalie was a somewhat tattered stuffed toy that she had loved since childhood. I had produced her in London when Ella and I went there with the intention, at the time, of staying on in England. But Julia had sent Natalie back to Australia for safekeeping when she moved on to New Zealand. She rang to say it was the best parcel she had ever received. I went for Christmas anyway. There was no prospective husband to meet, but my girls were there, and they had their lives and their friends to introduce me to. There was the further incentive of seeing Emma, who showed no indication of leaving England for home. We would all celebrate together, with just the baby Ella left to water the plants at home. I didn't notice the melanomas when I stepped off the plane, because we were all rugged up snugly in our winter clothes. I saw them the next day. I have spent my entire adult life keeping a watchful eye on my own, and have become quite an expert on bits that require the surgeon's knife. Unmistakable, one had grown on the top of a childhood scar, created on her right hand by the ear and throat surgeon who had removed a black gnarly growth at my request while performing a tonsillectomy on Julia. My melanoma history made me wary, but at the time the growth on Julia's hand was benign. She had been young enough at the time to mourn the loss of what she called her beauty spot. The other was on her left forearm, stark against her olive skin. How long had they been there? Time is of the essence when dealing with melanoma. She was dismissive, but Emma knew. Emma had indicated their presence months before on a visit from Liverpool. Julia understood my concern, But she was unconcerned. Doctors were expensive, and she was an alien without the benefits of access to public health care. Her youth an invincible shield. She wasn't ready to come home knowing that she couldn't go back. The recession had begun to make its mark on Dublin, and her lack of visa left her unemployed. It became clear that she had no option but to come home. She and Katrina stayed on after I left, with Natalie tucked into my luggage for safekeeping. But they were making plans to visit India on their homeward journey. They were in no rush and would travel for as long as their money allowed. They arrived home at the end of March to a warm welcome from their friends. We celebrated with a party at my home, but my attention was on the doctor's appointment that I had booked weeks before with our GP. Our GP removed the growths, and we waited for the results to determine if they were indeed melanomas. Julia wasn't too concerned, I guess because she had grown up as a witness to my own melanomas, and mine had always been removed successfully. I was concerned because I knew that a long time had elapsed since their appearance. The results revealed that both were melanomas, and that a skin specialist would be required to remove the remaining cancerous cells, as they had spread beyond the boundaries of the obvious growths. The specialist cut her hand from the base of her finger to her wrist and removed more tissue from her arm, leaving a crater about 10 centimetres long. It was unpleasant, and the surgery left her sore and uncomfortable. However, the specialist was certain that he had been successful in removing all the cancer. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling lucky that the scars were the worst of what she had to show for what I felt was a close call. By May, the scars had healed, and at the end of the month the twins celebrated their 28th birthday, full of promise for the future. On the day we received the news from Liverpool that Emma's marriage was over and she was coming home. We were all delighted to see the end of what had been a very unhappy union, and rejoiced in the knowledge that for the first time in 10 years we would all be together again. Julia went back to work, but she was plagued by doubts of the future, restless as always, her friends breastfeeding or pregnant, torn between applying for a Canadian working visa and the lure of babies. Trapped by her learning difficulties, she felt that a waitress had a limited time, that restaurants were the domain of the youthful face, no tired faces to spoil the meal. She needed a second job because it became apparent that some expensive dental work was required, and applied for work back at the city's airport where she had worked on previous visits home. Her application was initially rejected because the employer complained to the co-worker who had recommended Julia that he believed she had psychological problems. Julia was bewildered. I pointed out that her scars did indeed look as if she was a victim of self-harm. She got the job because cancer is okay, self-harm is not. When Emma came home in September, she moved with the twins into their father's house. He is retired and spends months travelling overseas, leaving his house vacant. Julia had been living there with him because she was anxious that he was advancing into old age, and she wanted to spend 12 months with him, wanted to say thank you to her dad. An unexplainable feeling that time was running out. But she got it wrong. It wasn't his time that was running out. The girls launched themselves into life, but Julia laboured with depression. She complained of regular bouts of nausea, but dismissed them, buried in her busy workload. The year disappeared, and as Christmas approached, Katrina took a job in a pub in Western Queensland. I made trifle for Christmas lunch because Julia could not conceive of a Christmas without trifle. Her very close friend Ian was also with us. But Ella speculated that she had an uneasy feeling we were missing the only opportunity to spend Christmas together. And Julia announced that she had a lump under her arm.